Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you so much, Arnaud, for having me here, and for honestly for bringing up this UX writing community in China and giving them a place to gather. This is critically important, and I am super excited to be here today to talk about this decisions over deliverables. I want to talk about the things you can do and the many things that AI cannot do to frame the conversation about developing the right skills, doing the right things, and nurturing the right relationships so that we all have excellent careers in our collective future. Anna has already introduced me more than enough. I will say that the second edition of Strategic Writing for UX is coming out not real soon because I still have technical edits to make from reviewers. I'm working on that right now. But there will be a brand new chapter in there about AI and about creating content with and for AI in our features. So let's talk about what generative AI can do. This is generative and not general AI. That might be a whole different thing, but today's AI, today's LLMs aren't that thing at all. So what it can do is generate convincing new text rapidly. So this is based on large language models. It is mostly worldwide at the moment. This is based on English text. It is incredibly bad at this in some languages that have been less represented digitally. So the training pools have been much smaller. But let's talk about this generate convincing new text. Well, convincing has an asterisk because it's convincing because it was trained to be convincing. First, people chose the content for it to be trained on. Then humans provided, in these early models, provided direct training, approving and rejecting different text it generated. So the primary characteristic of a lot of the text generated by GPTs, for example, is based on that broad corpus of written text that was based on marketing, a huge amount of marketing, persuasive content, content created to convince people of something usually commercial. And as humans, we tend to take convincing as a positive. It's a sign that something is good when it's convincing. But in this era right now, things that are fundamentally inaccurate or inappropriate or plain bad for us, it can also be convincing. And we see that around the world, and we see audiences around the world who are in their teens and 20s just turn off from it entirely and say, that smells like nonsense. They might not say nonsense. So the convincingness, that's one aspect of what content can do, but it's not something that it should always do. But the LLM generated text tends to be there even when you try to change its tone. Okay, it can generate convincing text, but there's also new text. Okay, so there's another asterisk here. It's not new. This is the opposite of new. These AIs, these LLMs were built to be using existing words, existing fragments of words, and regurgitating them up according to how frequently they appeared after the previous word in the training content, like where they are related to each other in this multi-dimensional vector space. This is based on cliche on a massive scale. So here's just a screenshot of typing into a field. This is the same technology that underlies autosuggest. So if you enter into a new document, there's nothing new under the sun. This is an adage in English. The AI suggests you complete that adage. There is nothing new about an adage by definition. So it's convincing and it's new, but rapidly. Well, getting back to this, it's sort of rapid. These generative AIs can create gobs and gobs of text faster than you and I can type it. Once it has had excellent prompting, and based on the years, the 50 years or so it took us to get here, So it can legitimately do these things, and people get convinced by it fast. It puts on a great show. And like all tools, it's good for the things it's good at, right? So let's think about what generative AI can't do. Generative AI, the way it exists right now, it cannot invent new ideas independently. It can generate gobs of probable content based on the new ideas you came up with and prompted it with. But by design, they don't come up with their own ideas independently. They don't get inspired, they get directed. They don't get curious, they get informed. They sit quietly, they wait for us to prompt them, just like any other tool would. Even AI agents. And, really, we don't want AI agents going out and proactively doing things for us. Uh, we give them a lot, some people give them a lot of their information to, here's my credit card, order me a pizza. I don't think I want my credit card being at the hands of an AI that can be suggested to do lots of things. So there's a terrific article on Technology Review called Why Does AI Hallucinate? But here is the bottom line. Hallucinating is all that they do. Generative AI is a statistical probability machine. It spits out the next likely word every time you crank its proverbial handle. So here's another thing they don't do. They cannot drive consensus among people. In my job as a content designer and as a small business owner, in really any content design job, any creative job, it's a job because we work with other people. We respond to the constraints that those people are under. We respond to the constraints that we're under technologically and interpersonally. And we have to figure out what those constraints even are. What I learned as I advanced in my career, going from a junior UX writer onward, is the process of designing gets into territory that is more and more ambiguous. When those design problems are ambiguous, even figuring out the problem is something that the group of people I'm working with needs to have consensus about. We need to all understand the problem in similar enough ways that we can communicate among each other. So, driving that consensus, coming up with the ideas and ways of framing things so that we can all buy into it, that's critical. And the AI can't do that. How would it do that? So, can't invent new ideas, it can't drive consensus. It also can't be accountable for its own decisions. Now, there's all kinds of caveats and warnings on GPT tools like ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. There's all kinds of those caveats saying, hey, this might not be right. This might be totally false. This AI might make things up. Always check because it might not be okay. But we're humans who are lazy. And by humans who are lazy, I mean we are mammals. We are organisms who are designed to spend as little energy as we can to get done what we need to get done. If we don't have unlimited energy, we need to eat food, we need to breathe air in order to process this energy. And our entire evolutionary history for hundreds of thousands of years says, hey, slow your roll. Try to do that with less energy. So the AI is coming in. We've made a tool that comes in and helps us spend less energy. So as we're talking right now in 2025, countries and governments and regions haven't yet settled who is responsible, who is accountable when an AI makes a promise or gives an answer that's terrible. And people use that advice. Lawyers have been fined and cited. No, I don't think anybody's been disbarred or removed from the ability to practice law anywhere. But correct me if I'm wrong. for citing cases that don't exist in their arguments. And a Canadian airline was ordered to refund the cost because the AI had promised that. And there's more and more examples coming up all the time. So we don't yet have a society-wide decision about who's responsible and how high those stakes are. The AI doesn't understand stakes. It doesn't understand cost. It doesn't understand um, it doesn't understand the personal risk that you and I would try to avoid of giving terrible advice and moving things forward. So it doesn't understand accountability. But real accountability is still out there, and it's probably going to be decided by the courts later. Okay, we've talked about what the generative AI currently can do and can't do, a really high level. Let's talk about what you and I can do as content designers, as UXers in general. So you and I can invent new ideas independently, and we can decide whether to pursue them. So you and I can go through our life and one day have a sudden inspiration. We might say, oh, this would really be better if we did it another way. And we can message our team and be like, hey, I just had a thought, right? What if we had a new feature? What if we changed the way we frame it to make other things easier? This kind of insight, this inspiration is so valuable and it is so hard to imitate. I hear from people, and I've used it this way myself. Oh, but Chat GPT gave me so many ideas for this. Did it? Did it tell you how other people have done it in the past? No, that's not a new idea. It can be really valuable to go there and say, oh, I need to write a cover letter, or I need to write a formal letter to the government requesting a thing. How do I do that? What do examples of that look like? And it can help you do that. You know, just like this antique book from 1963, the Business Letters Desk Book. I mean, there's examples right here of old formal letters, and I can use those. Very useful. So, yeah, I found this at an antique store. So, when companies lose experienced people on a team who know so much and have great insights and relevant ideas about what's going on in that company, that is expensive because not only does the company need people who are experienced and grounded in that material to come up with new ideas, it needs the team and needs those people to decide whether those ideas are worth pursuing. You need to decide whether that's going to be a little effort or a lot. Or let's check with dev and find out if it's going to be easy. You might use tools, and maybe you'll use AI tools to help you decide whether it's a good idea, but the spark needs to come from people. Okay. You can also drive this consensus among people. And not just that. It's not just that we can show up and figure things out and determine the top truth out of all of those ambiguities or invent that new reality. We can call a meeting. And I mean, AI agents are starting to like, oh, it can put things on my calendar and invite people to it. Sure. But calling a meeting, scheduling a meeting is not the same thing as welcoming people to the meeting, letting them know it'll be a valuable use of their time, getting the people there to share that common understanding, iron out their differences, contribute their diverse ideas, and create something better together than they could have separately. That is magic. And it is magic that we do with each other. Now, it's magic when the people are strangers to each other, but that's actually much easier. Um, it is much more magic when the people know each other and have reasons to both trust and not trust, and the relationships are deep and complex, and they have motivations and biases and ideas and conflicts that you may or may not know about. So when we are doing this, we are nurturing a healthy community. or we at least have the capacity to do that. Some of us don't do that all the time and wish that we did, and maybe before we die, we'll get really good at it. But we can establish relationships that are durable among other humans that later on, in different contexts, are meaningful to us. I just had coffee the other day with somebody I haven't seen physically in the past, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, but we worked together like 13 years ago. And we had coffee together and spent an hour and a half. How wonderful. And how wonderful that we can still help each other and be relevant to each other now because we established that healthy community. I guarantee you, I am not going back to versions of tools that I used 13 years ago and saying like, hey, my buddy, AI. So we have that community with us. Now, we can also be accountable for our own decisions. So what this means is that we know when something is risky or dangerous or terrible or unethical. We can advocate for our users appropriately. We can advocate for our team. We can advocate for ourselves. We know that risk is something we spend that might cost us and our companies more in the future if we don't make that spend now. And you know what? When we're accountable in that way, not only can we reap the rewards of that and say, hey, we were responsible for this. I was responsible for doing this. I invented this. I worked with these people. It was fantastic. And or it was hard. And I made this new product or service or human experience a possibility. Now, we can also vote with our feet to some extent when terrible things are happening. And that is something these generative AI models cannot do. Think about, I think about people who talk about how capable AI models are and how much they can do for you, and they're just like people. Well, are they so much like people that you're going to give them the freedom to walk away? Are they so much like people that you're going to uh, let them tell you, nah, dude, not doing that? No, we're treating them like people who are enslaved. Is that okay? Are they people? This is the crux of the matter here. We can vote with our feet, and to use that power and to make sure that we keep that power, we have to do that. We have to be discouraging when people around us have terrible ideas and want us to be doing terrible things. When things change and they're not good and we need to move on, or we've just outgrown a situation, when there aren't new challenges there for us anymore, we can work in different places. We can work in different industries. We can adapt to entirely new situations. And then when we do that, we can cross pollinate what we've learned before. We bring what we've learned in one place and we bring it to new situations and new teams. And then we extend that to new situations and we learn. So, deeply heavy. That was an overview of what AI can't do and what we can do. So, here's what I choose. Based on all of this, I choose making good things over making copious things. The AI is good at generating that lots of text, right? But it doesn't know whether it's good. I can make good things. I can't make as many things or as fast. What this means is if a job needs lots and lots and lots of content generated, that might be better for an AI to do. Great, go use that AI. Maybe I can even help set up that AI. If it's an interesting challenge and I can do it well, but I'm going to choose places where the UX content needs to be good instead of just lots of it. So I'm also going to choose problems to work on where the content needs to be innovative. I can't always make these choices. Let me take a step back from these choices. Sometimes I don't have these choices in front of me. Sometimes I only have clients who need generic but important business problems solved. Okay. I will try to solve it in the best way that I can. It will still be good over copious. And I might even tell my clients, like, I'm going to help you set up some good, and then you will be equipped to use AI for as long as you need it not to change much to make that happen. For this innovative over generic, I would love to work on things and topics and ideas and features and products that nobody's imagined before and that we don't have good language for yet. And there's a surprising number of these things happening in all kinds of industries all the time. Humans are creative. So we can do these innovative jobs where AI can't, because the generative AI is only adequate when the content needed is pretty generic. Content that's so similar to what's been written before that it can just string together words probabilistically, where there's plenty of examples for that AI to use. So when I can, I'm going to push to be working on things that are hard to describe, hard to explain, not generic at all. So I'm also going to look at accurate over probable. I don't know what happened here. I usually have speaker notes in front of me and now it's blank, but accurate over probable, because I will be held accountable for what the accuracy of that is. It needs to be more than probably okay if I'm working on um, enterprise level tools that people will use at work, or on scientific tools that people actually need to have accuracy for, or any tools that involve people's users' data so that I can say accurately what happened with that data. The AI can think of what's probably likely to happen given its data set. Well, I can do better than that. So I will choose to work on accuracy. Now, this brings up something else. I'm not there just to serve all these other roles, right? Like I'm there to serve the users, I'm there to serve the PMs, the product team, all of that. But more than that, I'm there to collaborate with them as a team. I'm establishing relationships and I'm going to nurture those relationships. I should never be enslaved to an organization or corporation or to a product team or anything else. I'm not just the tail of the dog wagging. If I'm just serving a product team as a word delivery system, then why wouldn't they go use an AI that doesn't need a salary? At the end of the day, companies want to hire me and people like us, because we work collaboratively. We add important insights and directions to our team. I'm not there to hand off deliverables. I'm there to make a product or service work better for the business and for the people using it. I do this while working inside a team where we have these cooperative, mutually beneficial relationships. So to do that, earlier we talked about how AI is ungrounded, it's unaccountable, it can be irresponsible. But you and I, our butts are on the line. We're accountable. What that also means is being embodied rather than ethereal. And what I mean by this is, while I work virtually, I work over online meetings with and messages and email and all the rest of it with most of my clients most of the time. But I'm not just a dial-up service, right? I'm not just hey, give me strings for this, give me words for this. As a content designer, my expertise is not something you can tap into with a Slack message with some lorem ipsum in a wireframe. Like can you just fill in these boxes without us ever having to talk? Heck no. I am much more than a box on the screen or a response in a chat. I'm all here, and I'm going to bring my full self and my full expertise to my work. So with all of that, why are some companies choosing AI over people? Well, this is a really hard time to be in a creative role, especially if a creative person had the idea that their value to the company is create copious amounts of text. Big tech companies are pleasing shareholders over making product. Shareholders have been talking in very hand-wavy terms about how AI is the next wave of technology. And if you don't use it, you're going to be left behind. They've been telling each other, investors have been telling each other, with very little understanding of the technology, how many jobs will be automatable. I personally have heard executives talk to each other and make promises that are just not possible. And I can say that they're not possible given a pretty deep technical and theoretical understanding of this, leveraging my physics degree to say, oh, yeah, that can't work that way. But when this class of people who are mostly working on money and this abstract concept of value, when they hear automate jobs, they see dollar signs. Jobs are expensive. People are expensive. They think automation will be cheaper, but they also don't know what the actual cost of that automation is yet. So for now, they're making decisions that have a few immediate effects. They're laying off people. Their stock price goes up. It makes them money. They get free advertising in the news about their new AI. And these people who they don't care about are losing jobs. So whatever hardly ever seems to happen, though, is that AI is making the money long term. Like how I started this talk. Generative AI is pretty good at that convincing, generic, rapid production of text. But what does it take to keep that automation running? What does it take to retrain and maintain and secure that technology as hackers get better and better at getting the models to do harm to the company and to the customer information it stores? How much energy and fresh water does it take to run the data centers that these AI machines run in? What does all this cost? AI is going to create more jobs than it is ending. And most of those jobs that it is ending are going to be quietly rehired over the next few years. And that has already been happening. So here's why I'm confident. First thing is trends. I look at the longer trends. Industry tech companies are hiring many more of us than 6 years ago. I wrote my book 6 years ago, and it was the first book from a major publisher about content design. We were very few then. We are many, many, many more now. The people making health technology, making cars, making tools, making toys that our lives depend on, they still need the content to be accurate, concise, usable, accessible, and in unique scenarios that the AI literally cannot imagine because it has no imagination. These scenarios depend on having the intuition of being a human living inside a body, understanding systems of work to figure out. I'm also confident because of history. The internet, one of the promises or threats of the internet in the 90s and the 2000s was that all the companies will never have physical presences again. We will never go to brick and mortar stores again. That's also not true. Instead, the internet made it so that companies needed to have both physical and virtual presences. That isn't to say that those haven't changed, but that still has happened. More jobs have been created because of these new technologies. They're not the jobs that happened before, but jobs in which the same skills were transferable and new skills could be learned. Change is the only constant. And people in content have already seen and weathered a huge amount of change. We got this. Here's the biggest reason I have confidence, though, is the incentives. People talk about AI as the next industrial revolution. And I say, sure, let's look at that. Why was the Industrial Revolution successful? One important reason is that it created work, physical work, beyond the capacity of our human bodies. Massive engines and complex machinery moved literal mountains of ore, of cotton, of wool. It changed our bodies and our landscapes and our societies. But to do that work, every person involved in the creation of the product, and these were usually very poorly paid, in very dangerous circumstances, people who worked 12 or 16 hours a day. Every person involved in that creation was incentivized by quality. If the ore wasn't a high quality product coming out of mines, the miners are paid less. If the cotton wasn't high quality coming from the new automated cotton gins, the owner of the cotton gin didn't get paid. If the fabric coming from the massive textile factories had blemishes in that fabric, the individual workers were punished. Every step of the way, there were incentives for quality baked into the system. This is a huge problem for generative AI. Quality in content is a function of its purpose, its language, and its context. Content can stay accurate for years, and the world can change, and it's not accurate anymore. And the individual humans giving the AI feedback and the AI models that give each other feedback are subject to those perverse incentives of speed versus accuracy, too. It's not possible for quality to govern the massive data sets that have been scraped from the internet without copyright holders' permission to create the large language models that underlie the LLMs. The foundations themselves were of dubious quality, which we see in all kinds of junk answers from generative AI. It will probably keep being good enough for many things, maybe even 80 to 90% of things like autocorrect currently is, since there's always a human saying, oh, I really didn't mean to write duck, right? The generative AI will keep being mostly right. It isn't, though, good enough when the content matters. The junk content in advertising has skyrocketed, which we're getting better as humans at tuning out. So what we will see is an increase in companies understanding that what we do, making content that helps people meet their goals while meeting business goals, that's worth every penny, especially the more we can cut through that noise. So what about folks who are new to content design? This is a really hard time to be getting into UX roles in general. Capitalism has meant, unregulated capitalism has meant a ton of shareholder-driven layoffs. There's a ton of folks looking for jobs. And there's a huge temptation to go straight to the AI tools. There's a misconception, I think, because AI is the future, according to some folks, that there's no point in learning how to do any writing without it. But what the AI generation of content misses is the thinking process. I'm good at my job because I've spent years practicing the thinking that goes behind choosing and iterating the UX solutions that meet people's needs and solve business problems. The thing I'm worried about most is new folks missing that thinking process and missing out on having people who can teach them that, and books and classes that can teach them that. I think about how whole generations of people don't understand numbers and quantities the same way that our grandparents did, because we all used calculators. When I got my physics degree, I learned that a huge part of the work was to learn how to think about math and numbers. Fast forward to now, and I worry that in 10 years, it's going to be a lot harder to hire a good writer, because so many people who are students now won't have practiced the kind of thinking that helps us create fantastic new content. So if you're coming to this meetup at UX Writing China and you're new to content design, holy mackerel, welcome to the field. Learn all the ways that you can be useful, unique, and valuable in your own human self, whether you use AI tools or not. Now, to help with that, and for anybody else who's worried about this, I do recommend this book by Kevin Roose. He has these 9 rules for humans in the age of automation. Several of them I've talked about today in this presentation, but the book goes far beyond this talk, and I definitely recommend picking it up. So that is my talk. As you walk away from this, and we are going to take your questions, Remember that your decisions are far more valuable than the artifacts you deliver. To the extent that you can make decisions about how to make those artifacts, with whom you make them, the purposes you make them for, please make those decisions with your wide open eyes, knowing how much more valuable they are than anything that can be generated from old text. And when you can choose the jobs that only you can do. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. I think there were some questions in text here,
Yes.
but I've missed them.
Thank you so much, Torrey.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Good to see
All
a
right,
few faces here.
Yes. We do have a couple of questions. We do have a couple of questions, but we do have even more comments. So it's great.
Yes.
We can take a look and engage into conversation if needed. But first question is from Anna, which is, what are some good use cases for AI generated content? Are there any content designers who, in your opinion, are leveraging AI for content production while embracing their human powers? How do they manage? That's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of insight into what other content designers are doing and how they might be leveraging AI. I'm hoping that there's going to be even more talks about that at this year's Button. And that's mostly where I have access to these is the same way you do,
Right.
seeing what people are sharing and what people are doing with that. I have heard several different ways of people using it for prompting. And I've seen, so one of my clients is a multinational company, and several designers work on the UX writing without a UX writing help. So they've made various AI helpers, and they've trained the Figma bot to be able to produce things closer to their voice. I have yet to see them successfully just use what Figma gives them from the AI. They always say like, "Oh, that's not what I wanted," and then they change it. So mostly I'm seeing it in a helper way, similar to how I see myself use autocorrect. Like I'm typing a thing and, oh, I didn't mean to misspell that, or I didn't mean that bad grammar, and it highlights it for me. Yeah. I hope that answers the question, Anna.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just really curious about this whole overlap, right? Because you were talking about copious versus good and precise, right? But that's I think that's a very tricky balance, right? And I think maybe the first step we need to take to address this kind of two polar opposites is like we need to decide which content really needs to be good, right?
Right. We need to decide that. And honestly, it's so I have heard of marketing professionals, and this is very anecdotal, that and sales professionals who are using it to generate emails and, especially like targeted marketing to places, but the editing cycle is always necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sure.
We had another question. This one is from me. When everyone in an organization, like a company, can use AI to create content, it is, in my opinion, a good direction to have AI creating good copy instead of just copious amount of copy. But how to make sure that all those people can use AI to create good content rather than just copious amount of content?
Yeah. So then what you're working on is, how do the humans make sure that it's good, not the generation itself, like expecting the basic generation to just be good by itself is not realistic. What you can do is have it be copious. Do you see this ridiculous cat who wants my attention? Yeah.
Oh my God, what a cutie.
That is Hawthorne. What you can do is keep saying, no, that's not good enough. Make it more like this. No, that's not good enough. make it more like this. So you can lean into the copiousness instead of it being good. And just say, keep doing it. No, not that. Do this. More like this. Over here. No, you're losing it. Because it doesn't know that it's good. And so when you're getting your entire company is like, but it's doing it for me, then I lean into education of those people and say, oh, so what you wanted here was it to be more concise. What you wanted here was to be using language that the customer would know. What you wanted was to be including information that they'll need to know 2 steps along. And just keep bringing up the basics of usability and your voice until people are either aware of it enough to be using it to prompt the AI or getting good enough at writing at that point to use the AI less. Yeah, it does not remove the problem of the people not knowing what good looks like.
Very true. Okay, we have many comments as well, but one's particularly interesting is from Maria. She writes, in my daily work with content, I have observed that it can be quite challenging to convince stakeholders or leaders about the clear limitations of LLMs. As content designers, we are fully aware of both the limitations of AI and our own capabilities. However, it's still concerning to be consistently challenged or questioned by stakeholders about your business value and the business outcomes AI may bring them. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I talk to those people about, okay, what is it we want the human to do? Right? Like, presumably we're making a user interface and we need for humans to be using this interface. And the human in that case will meet the human's goals and the business will meet the business goals because of this interaction. So I need to know, how does the business make its money here? And I need to be able to remind them of that and say, okay, we need the business to make money because this person will keep coming back to it, or and see more ads, or they will keep buying these things, or they will buy these things, whatever it is, however it is that we make money. And then I say, I can make that happen because I am making it more usable or more attractive, or I'm reminding them of the value prop right here. And I try to anchor that on the business value of what's going on, which sometimes is the user value, right? Like, we are in a tough situation where we have to disclose this important thing that regulators demand in Europe. Sure. But we need to disclose it in a non-scary way that helps people engage appropriately for themselves.
Yeah.
I can help with that because I understand your business problem. So that is how I talk to individual product owners about, here's why you want to work with me, because I get your problem and I can tell you why this is better than this, why this other thing is better than this other thing. I thought when I was writing my book in 2018 that I would write down that UX text scorecard for usability.
Right.
I thought, oh, I'm just writing this stuff down, but everybody knows this. That turned out not to be the case. And it is surprising to me how often I go back to that. And sometimes working with some clients now, I will literally have it open in another window and I will copy and paste that rationale into comments and say, because of copy, paste this, then we should change this thing to this other thing. And that helps. Weirdly, even though it's antique now, 6 years. Oh, 7 years.
All right. Okay. We had also another comment from Kanako. She wrote also, I feel the audience is accepting the AI created not that perfect, but okay content. I'm coming from localization background, and in localization, I'm afraid that people don't expect any more really good translation. And then Anna replying, playing a bit of the devil's advocate here, does all the content really need amazing localization? Question mark. Just like Tori was saying, maybe for some cases, copious is good enough. What's your take on this?
My take is that people using the localization have no idea whether or not this was accurate.
Mm.
Thank you for that question, Kanako. It is really tough. Like, so I read English, I speak English. I have studied several other languages to the level that I know that I don't know shit. Okay?
This humility, fantastic.
Taking notes.
I am not a localizer, and I have depended on localizers throughout my UX writing career. And when they come back to me and say, that is not a thing you can say in this language. When I was younger, when I was new, I would say, oh no, you definitely can. Let's just work on it. No. Sometimes the use of metaphor is so deeply ingrained in language that if you don't have that metaphor, that core metaphor that leads to the root of that word, that leads to the way that word is used in this other language, in this other culture, then you might not be able to frame it that way at all.
Mm.
And then we get, I think there's plenty of examples online of AIs not understanding that the same word has completely different meanings in different cases, and it just summarizes all of that together quite happily. So yes, I totally agree. The audience is totally accepting of that translated content, incredibly mediocre, sometimes terribly wrong content, because how would they know? They don't read the source language. They might just think, oh, this company's stupid, right? But especially with the AI generated content, it tends to be grammatically correct.
Yeah.
Just completely inaccurate. Like, it didn't say that at all. But yes, I see how that made a complete sentence. Right on. That's really tough.
Yeah, and if I may make an additional comment here, Tori, I think it takes us back to what good is, and maybe even to the concept of UX content scorecard that you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Because maybe we can do something similar for localization. Maybe we can find a way to communicate to our stakeholders that, hey, maybe we should have a shared understanding of good first, you and me.
Right. But even that shared understanding won't be accurate for across all languages. Like
Absolutely.
the article and research that you and Arnaud did about content in China versus all of this content guidance. Like I gave crappy content guidance for Chinese interfaces in my book, right? As you mentioned, the more is more. One of my favorite memories from my first few months of being a content designer, and even then we weren't called UX writers, we were called content developers, whatever that means, at Microsoft, working in Xbox. And I worked with an Xbox PM who grew up in China, and who had, I think, even started work in China and then come to the US and was working at Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. And she had this, we were working on the payment flow on Xbox.com, I think, and she had this big block of text that was pretty repetitive at the end of the purchase flow that said, you know, we might email you with this email address and we might do these things and you might, you know, these terms and conditions will apply. And she had made it quite redundant. And I had gotten it down to like 6 words. And I thought, great, let's ship it. And she came back and said, you can't cut this. And it came down to we might have been in an argument at that point. And she said, it has to be long so people will know it's important. And then the lights went on, and I went, I remember this from the 3-hour welcome meeting when I studied at Fudan University, of where everybody said the same thing in different ways 15 different times, which as a teenager, I did not understand why anybody would do this. It needs to be long so people would know it was important. So I had to back way up and say, we're coming at this from different directions. And we ended up compromising and doing some user research. And she was baffled. She's like, how could this be working better? We're shipping it in the US first. Anyway, so that it has to be long so people know it's important is something that would not have occurred to me and was against all of the advice I gave in the book.
I think what you just described is a daily reality for many people online right now.
Yes, people are commenting. That's the truth, what they're experiencing every day.
Absolutely.
Okay. We had another question from Jared. What are the ways you feel AI can enable content creators to improve quality rather than just efficiency? But I feel that following this question, you sort of already answered that in a way, right?
Yeah. So the AI can help us. Honestly, it does sort of reopen the conversation. So this is sort of a sideways way, because now, like you were describing, you have stakeholders saying, well, I can, why isn't this AI content good enough? Or I used this, can you just rubber stamp it that it's fine and we'll move forward? And that opens up this idea of education. So we get to improve quality now in the maybe not just for this one thing, but explaining to people. And we have to get good at that explanation too, so they keep listening and they learn from it. That what does good mean? To Anna's point, like, what does good mean in this case? What are all of these rules for what good means? And how are they specific to this language and this culture, etc.?
Okay. Another question from we have a lot of questions, so we can stop whenever you want. So you're not too tired. This one is interesting. A question from Betty. What's your magic of evaluating the impact of content design without quantitative numbers?
Yes. Well, we can talk about what I try to do is not to separate it too hard from the overall user experience and what the goal is for the user experience. We say, okay, is it important that people have a sense of brand affinity, that they would come back to this brand versus going to a different one? Is it important how, like there's quantitative ones, like how fast can they move through the flow? How frequently, like what's the rate at which people enter the flow versus complete the flow? And all of those quantitative numbers, sometimes the product is just too young to be tracking those consistently, and you don't have access to any of those. So I lean on things like support comments and App Store comments. So support comments, like when people contact support and, whether they're typing into a chat or they're sending emails or there's transcripts of voice calls with people, and say, what is the sentiment of these things? And that's something that AI is not great at, but it helps convince some stakeholders to say, like, hey, the sentiment analysis has improved, or people are talking about these things. We've made this fix to fix that, and now people talk about those things less. Great. So even even when it's not quantitative, the qualitative takes some work to investigate. So considering that as part of the work and I bring it up proactively with product owners and say, great, you're asking me for some work. And I'm saying to you, what's the effect you want me to have? And how are you measuring that? And I put it back on them because they are usually the bosses of measuring the effects. And sometimes they say, well, we'll just know. And I'll say, okay, but can I quote you on it? Right? Like, you're saying you'll just know, but I'm going to shape that. I'm going to talk about that in ways that are a net benefit to my work.
All right. Okay. Which one? A question from Jensen. How can content designers convince stakeholders the value of us, content designers, leading more strategic and system level project? And he adds, when they understand AI can provide high quality content, I believe as a reference to our previous question, but they aren't involved in the design process enough to understand the business value and impact good content can provide. So how can content designers convince stakeholders the value of us leading more strategic and system level projects?
Yeah. So this frequently, you have to have a longer time horizon for it. So if you come up to a stakeholder and you've never talked to them about it before, and you say, I think we can solve this with this project that will take 9 months. And they say, who are you? Why? What? We're not starting any 9 months project. How would we even measure that? What would happen? Why? Why do I care? What you do is what you can do, what I do is I lay seeds for that. And I say, while I'm working on one thing, like, I will ask questions frequently, like, do we have a standard way we talk about this? What is the word that most people will understand? Do we use it consistently? Do we have a controlled vocabulary or a terminology list where we store these things? And frequently, nobody has those things. And I say, that's really something that would make this faster right now. So while I'm working on things, I point out how helpful it would be to have a different tool. And then after I've worked with that person for a while, or that team, and I say, this is like the 85th time, or maybe just the 4th or 5th time that I've really thought that this would save us time or energy or money. And sometimes this has even come up with looking at support logs and saying, like, the transcripts of support chats and things like that, and saying, do you know that all of our support agents call these by different names? That's horrifying from an operational perspective. It means that there's no economy of scale. It means that you're confusing people who would call in at different times. It's a terrible idea. Do you know that this is happening? I bet that is really helping to confuse our customers, which is then having this add-on effect. This might be related to that business goal you're going after of simplifying, reducing support costs, increasing revenue, increasing completion rate, whatever they're going after. I don't pitch a project that isn't related to what they're already interested in. I say, here's your business goal. Here's how this structural thing will save that. Here's how this systemic work will save that. For things like adding content patterns to design systems, I can sometimes even say, let's look at the ticketing queue of all of these asks for UX writers and say, how many of these would evaporate, right? Or be a lot faster and easier to take care of if the designers and the developers had access to patterns that they started out from. And I go, let's just do a little bit of back of the envelope math. Like, this doesn't even have to be good math. It can just be like, oh, there's 100 tickets. It would save me probably at least an hour or two of work per these. So that's 200 hours of work saved. Holy mackerel. That's real money. Then they get interested, but they want to know, what's the difference? What difference would it make? And we can tell them that. And it's on us to tell them that.
Very true. A great example of system thinking, just thinking about the whole thing as the system. And yes. Okay.
Oh, right. And I'm supposed to, so I'm working on the second edition of my book right now. I'm actually writing a different book right now also that is all about connecting UX skills, not just content skills, but UX skills to business strategies, and specifically to the impact that they can make.
Oh,
and we're
fantastic.
writing it. I've pulled in 2 co-authors, a UX research specialist and a UX design generalist, who've had long and illustrious careers. And we are making it sort of like a wine pairing guide, where you can be saying, oh, I'm doing this skill. How can I talk about the impacts it makes? How, what impact should I be measuring to see what impact it makes? Alternatively, you can go to the impact and say, I need to make this business impact, or my PM is worried about making this business impact. What are the UX skills that we should be doing? And then you go look at those UX skills. So we're 2 weeks away from our halfway deadline on it. So pray for us. We're tired.
Oh my God, good luck to you guys. Everybody's so
Thank you.
excited. Like, so many people in the chat are
Yes.
saying that they cannot wait to read it.
Me too.
I'm going to wish list that book. Yes.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yes, and also you do provide the UX skills evaluation service, right, Torrey?
There's a content skills evaluation that actually the book, doing the book came out of that work. So yeah, if you go to my website, which is catbirdcontent.com, you can find, I think up at the top it says skills or something, and it's linked in there somewhere.
Yes, if you interested in developing yourself in different ways, I suggest you strongly to take that test. It's very insightful, and you will learn a lot about yourself as a content designer. I'm not just promoting Torrey here. I took the test, and I can tell you from personal experience that it was very helpful.
Oh, good! I'm so glad.
Some testimonials. All right. Okay. What do you say, Anna? Perhaps one last question, and then we move to the breakout rooms?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay. One last question is from Kanako again. How do you train a new writer in AI, in the AI era, as an experienced content strategist?
Yeah, what I do with new writers is get back to basics, and I provide realistic scenarios. Like in one of the exercises that I have people do to sort of warm up in new writing scenarios is I give them, like, here is a sign-in screen, and I say, okay, you need people to sign in, but it's for a business. And if they already, this is only for non-administrators. And if they have an administrator account and they try to use this account creation, then they'll break the database. And that's a bug, but we're not fixing it yet. And there's also, and I sort of pile on this sort of realistic scenario, because frankly, most developers and designers and PMs don't come to us with the easy problems. We see those later and we clean them up. It's the hard problems that they're like, okay, so here's the thing, and everybody's going to use it this way, but they can't. That'll break everything. Please help us get them to see this thing that's normal, but use it in a non-normal way, and also understand a difficult abstract concept while they do it. So that's what I have people do, even in this AI era. And they go, and some people in the middle of this, learn to UX write workshop will, or at the beginning of it, will go to AI and say, the AI doesn't know what to do. Right.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. Because the AI is looking at the generic of all of them. But none of our problems are generic. So showing people what that is, showing people what it is to solve a non-generic problem, sort of kicks their brain back into high gear. So that's how I tackle it.
All right. Very good, very good.